water, and that's about equal, the ratios. They're about equal. We don't see the air, we don't see the water, it's just moisture. But it takes about that much to make it work. Plus, the soil microorganisms and their friends, they have to be in there.
What is the proportion of soil microorganisms?
Not much.
Not much.
But they're pretty microscopic.
Okay.
And it's a sliver. I don't know. And it varies. But we want to multiply those until they're 10, 15% or something.
You get starters for that.
Okay. Next. Okay. Nitrogen, or the green stuff. As humans, we call that protein. That's what's used to grow. It makes new cells, growth. The same with the microorganisms. They're live things. They need protein to grow and reproduce. That's the function of the green things. Okay, next. The brown things are carbon. As we normally say, the green things are soft, fresh green. And the brown things are dry, crunchy leaves, but there are lots of in-betweens. And I'll get into that later as far as carbon and nitrogen. But most all plants are cellulose. There's different formulas. There's this, the oak tree has a little different cellulose than the vine on the ground. That can't stand up by itself. But they're the same chemistry. And that's your sugar or your energy. It's not what we call carbohydrates. It's food. And so the microorganisms need that as well as the protein. This is their energy. Okay. Okay, this is the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Everything has both. We talk about the green things being high in nitrogen and the brown things being high in carbon, but there's always more carbon than nitrogen. Broccoli and lettuce is about 5-to-1 ratio. 5 parts carbon, 1 part nitrogen. That's still high in nitrogen. When wood branches, fresh cut branches, about 50-to-1. 50 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, and it goes up to almost 100. Initially, we're going to run our compost to around 25-to-1, between 20 and 30. But it's hard to figure that out because it's different. It's not like different chemistry stuff out or a recipe. You're taking the flour and the sugar, and it's already mixed together. Okay. So here's the startup ratio for your home composting. About 1 part of green stuff, fresh leafy greens, vegetables, that kind of thing, just barely dead. And 4 parts of brown stuff. And around here are deficited brown stuff. Unless you've got a tree that's prolifically dropping leaves. And some of them are, but they're, palo verde and mesquite leaves are tiny. It takes a lot to make a pot. We've got some of our members, I suppose they're still around. They used to go out to the park and sweep up out in Reed Park. They go out there and harvest them, bushels full, bags full of leaves. But in lieu of that, shredded newspaper or just torn up newspaper works. You have to have brown stuff.
Where does fresh horse manure fall?
Or
Horse manure.
manure is primarily brown, especially if it's aged, if it's dry. The brown stuff is usually dry. You usually have to put water to it. But fresh manure would be a little more on the green side, but it's still dry. Okay. Temperature. We're going to get this thing up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle. That's really composting. It's called hot composting. It may not get there, but that's a goal. And as such, the temperature that's in the middle, right in the middle, and then it cooled off because out here it's only whatever it is, room temperature or outside temperature. In the winter, that's pretty cold. In fact, this morning was very cold. I switched to winter clothes, got my sweatshirt and cover. But then, of course, that's warm enough to burn paper. Paper ignites down there around 40 or 150, but it's not wet. This won't happen unless it's got the right amount of moisture. So it won't. Now, if you're doing commercial composting, these huge commercial operations, they have to be concerned with that. They can erupt into flames. At home, we have that much trouble. And that's why we say the minimum is a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot cube, because you need that much insulation around the center so that it can get hot enough, and then it dissipates out. Now, if you put it in the container, that container wall, it adds some insulation value, but you still need some volume. And there are some containers. Just a pallet that or plywood or whatever you got, wooden boxes. We used to sell this one, as well as the ones we make out of the dumpsters. This is a really fancy one. I think this one here. But if you can see it, I don't know if you can, but it's full of holes. There's perforated holes in every one of those little things. And that's way too much vent for the desert. It dries out. Tumblers, I've been through 2 of these. They hold 55 bushels. That's 150 gallons. But they make compost.
Wow.
One thing, if you're using the tumbler, if you're using any of the tumblers, they're not cement mixers. Don't crank them over. Turn them over 2, maybe 3 times at the most, once a week.
I tried using the tumbler style composting in the past, and I just found it drying out here.
Yeah.
And then so the compost didn't really work until I went to the more pallet method.
Yeah, and then you just have to watch, like this one's got vents. You can see the little vent holes there. If you park those down, any extra water is going to run out. You usually want to keep the water. So you put them someplace in the middle. They have ones too that have 2 bins like this, but they're separate drums, so you don't have to turn the whole thing once, you just turn one up. This one over here shows a little door that slides up, and this black gold rolls out from the bottom. Ha ha. In Massachusetts, maybe, but not in Tucson. Every time I see these things, I tell people, you put a bolt through that thing or a screw and seal it. Never open it. Because once you do, you have trouble getting it closed. You won't get finished compost rolling out, guaranteed. Okay.
Can you just make a wire enclosure, you know, with 4 stakes?
Yeah, there's one with that one. This is the commercial one that's a plastic thing that's got perforated holes and it runs in a circle and clips together. And gotta be able to use it for a while and put it away or something. We can expand it as it gets bigger. But the wire is good. It's just going to dissipate the heat, the moisture faster. That's and the insulation value. But yeah, chicken wire. Or
Will it still work to do it in the winter if it's cold, a cold time of winter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It'll be smaller hot spot in the middle, but it works.
Okay.
I used to use that 1 by 3 wire, and I get a 13 to 15 foot length of it and make a circle on it. And I got it up to 120 degrees.
Good. Okay. So after we contain it, after we put it in something, I mean, we do have to contain it. Actually, because composting just leaves in the northwest, you pile them up in the corner and shovel a big pile of leaves, and you come back in the spring and there's some mulch for you. But out here, we have to, and you'll find out that you'll get animals, dogs, cats, anything else, if you leave a pile of it out without containing it, they're going to scatter. Birds too. Go after them. Our next step, after we've got some things set aside, is to feather. Those little squares and that square are the same, but there's a lot more surface area there. And these microscopic microbes, the bacteria, don't have very big mouth. They don't have teeth at all. They need to get only to the cut edges. And when I used to do this live, I'd bring in a stem of broccoli. I didn't have any today, but you can probably all use some broccoli at home. You imagine a big old heavy tough stem cut on both ends, especially the end that was cut for harvesting. This has got a scab. Microbes can't get to it. This is the tough skin up the side of the whole plant. Just like our human skin is designed to keep the insides in and the outsides out. We're covered with microscopic fungus and bacteria, but if you cut it, you'll bleed a little bit, and then they'll get in and make an infection, and you'll decompose. So it's the same thing with our food scraps. Like if you took that broccoli stem and slit it lengthwise, then the bacteria has a field day. They can do it right now. So we don't have to get it real finely chopped, but you need fresh cut places, because even tree branches, they heal themselves when you cut them. And leaves that fall off the tree is closed off, drawn out all what it wants, and get rid of it. So it's not going to decompose rapidly until it's broken and cut, or just lays on the ground. In nature, it lays on the ground for 5 to 10 years, with the trees, leaves piling on top of it. And then it finally gives up and decomposes. Okay. Okay. You got to turn this thing, stir it, mix it, whatever you want to call it. Did we bring the compost crank with us?
Yes.
There's some back there.
Hey.
And go back to it.
That's a little tree farm here.
One of each if you got it. Go ahead and make a picture.
You gone?
That's what we're going to show you why. But and that's with that, you don't need to move the compost bin or the tumbler over. You got not the tumbler, the container. Otherwise, if you're going to use a shovel, or that's a fork shovel, it's a garden shovel. You pick up that container. So you set it over here, and you shovel from that pile back into there, and that mixes it up. Or you've got this, see if I can get in there. You just screw down into the pile and pull it up. And sometimes you can't pull it up because you went too far. It's usually too wet. And you get a feel for it that way. And you can feel it's hot.
You just put it in several places?
Yeah. Yeah, you could do the whole pile until it's
Yeah,
out.
you don't need to turn
But I turned to.
Yeah. Wow. This is another one. This is a postal, which is mainly a digger for planting, but put it on a drill bit, on a drill. I recommend you file that flat so it'll grip, and you can put it works in the compost. Just anything like that stirs it up with that. This is the big one. It's up there. It's designed and made right here in Tucson. Designed by a father and son, and they make it in their garage. I don't know if they're still using their backyard garage. They may have moved to someplace else. It's nationwide. You can buy it from Amazon.
And doesn't sell them?
Pardon?
Doesn't Tucson Organic Gardeners sell them?
Yeah. Yeah, we have some, I guess, that's why we had them.
Yeah, you know.
We were selling them expensive, half the price that they are now online on Amazon. So I don't know what we're charging for them now. Nobody could tell them. We didn't, I don't think we bought any recently. We've had them for quite a while. But definitely it's a thing to have for aerating compost.
How often to turn?
Often do we want to do that? Well, you want to be a real composter. You have a thermometer, a soil thermometer, you have a logbook, and you go outside and you put it in there and you record the temperature. You can do that every hour if you want. Or once a day, and when the temperature gets to the top, it starts down, no matter how high. When it starts down, it's out of air, out of oxygen, or out of water. So turn it over, sprinkle it, whatever you need. Typically, you have to add a little moisture to it. Or you can go out once a week and turn it over. That's typical.
That's my
Same with the tumbler. Same with the tumbler. Crank it once a week, a couple of turns. Add moisture as you need it. And, go.
Joy commented that she loves her crank for the nearly finished compost, but she composts lots of twigs for the long haul. And then the crank gets hung up until the twigs break down.
Right. Until if you're using twigs and stuff like that, it takes, they need to break down where you can break them down first. We said chop things up. Even pine needles, they're pretty well sealed, actually, until they get really wet. But if you put them in a bag and stomp up and down on them, or put them on your driveway and drive the car over them, and also any of the leaves, get them all in the back, drive over them a couple of times, and make little powdery leaves out of them. They'll decompose back. Branches are the same way. Branches, it's only got one little access point for the bacteria. And so you need to either break it up, chop it, split it lengthwise.
About wood chipper.
The wood chipper, yeah, you can make sawdust, but the sawdust works with same with paper. If you shredded paper, sawdust or paper, you got to spread it thin, or you end up with a ball of paper in shape, and then the bacteria can't get into it.
I have a question about sawdust. What about the sawdust from plywood, where there's glue in there and that? What are your thoughts on that?
For the most part, I think it's okay. Now, you don't use any treated lumber that's been treated.
Right.
The same way you don't use oranges and citrus that's been treated. And if you buy it in the store, it's probably been treated. It's been either dipped or sprayed with a fungicide. Because if they don't, it's going to decompose and compost right throughout the old shelf in about 3 days. 2 to 3 days is all life citrus is going to last, especially when they stack them up 3 to 4 high in storms. So those are pretty well treated. But if you pick your own citrus off the tree, put that in the compost pile, it's gone in 3 days, guaranteed. Yeah. You don't have to chop it up about half a grapefruit in the middle of your compost pile. This is yours. Now, if that's the test too, if you don't know if that thing's been treated, just take a couple of half of orange or whatever it is, and you just stick it in the middle where it's hot, and come back in 2 or 3 days. And if you can find it, throw it away in the garbage. If you can't find it, it's good.
Oh,
They decompose real fast.
They have to be at 170 degrees.
No, most of them, most piles have trouble getting much over 100 unless you're really working on it.
So here's another question. What's the thought about freezing your green things? So like broccoli stems and cauliflower stems, freezing them before you add them to the compost.
If you're doing worm composting, that's brilliant. That's the way you treat your worm food. You take your green leafy stuff and freeze it. And then when it thaws out, it's black milk.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
worms can eat it. And what's the same would happen in the compost. It's just an extra step that you may not need, but it does help break it down fast because the cell walls are the cellulose disintegrate.
Freezing breaks the cell walls.
Okay. Before we use this stuff, we have to sift it or screen it. Put that in there. Humus, like humans, that's a Greek, it's from the Greek. And scientifically, humus has had all of the carbons and organic stuff. All the organic has been disassembled and there's no longer any organic material in there. So in my opinion, it's dirt, just plain dirt. It's not compost and it's not good for soil. So to a gardener or a farmer, we want to take that compost out before it becomes scientifically dead. What we want to do is we want to get rid of that high temperature decomposition. And go back to that again, we're going to get it up hot. That's done, it's not done by the heat, by the sun, it's done by the microorganisms working their little tails off. They're really working up the sweat because they've got protein and they've got carbohydrates and they get hot. And there's actually different microorganisms that appear at different temperature ranges. There's active during a certain temperature. When it's too hot, these guys quit. And another group takes over. And they hibernate until their temperature range is correct. So it's different organisms that get that temperature. But so now we've gotten rid of the hot stuff. So now we can put it in the ground and it's still going to continue to decompose. Microbes are still going to use it. But now it's not going to get real hot and feed it to the plants. It's not going to kill the plant roots. So the screen, half-inch hardware cloth is what I recommend. Unless you've got something you want to use in a potting mix, go down to a 1/4 inch. But you're not grading it, pushing it through that thing. You shovel it onto the screen. So it falls through, it's finished. Put it over a wheelbarrow or a bucket or whatever you've got to catch it. Or a tarp on the ground and spread it between 2 hot sawhorses or something. But what goes through is ready. What doesn't go through goes back in the pile, and then you have fresh new ingredients. And inspect it while you're at it. Look at it. There's a grub in there, put it back in there. Or put it on the fence post and the birds will come through. The grubs don't hurt your compost. They don't hurt the garden if they get in there either, because they're not eating live roots. That's a misnomer. If they're eating the roots, the plant's already dead.
Mine right now is full of grubs. It's so gross to look at them, but it's awesome. I mean, but they're just like in there.
Yeah.
But how often do you do the sifting?
When you think it's ready to get some harvest come out, when you're turning it, see a lot of what is considered finished compost. It won't look like the stuff you buy in the store. That's why you inspect it. You don't want any whole pieces. If you can identify it, it goes back in to work some.
Comment from Joy that she often finds gecko eggs in her compost from July to October. So her new policy is to let the bins rest those months so the geckos can do their thing. And then she also gets mesquite seeds sprouting. And so she'll let those, if she doesn't want to use them, she'll just cycle those back in.
Anything that's, you can't, so you return that and then fill it up with some fresh green and brown stuff. Add water if needed.
I have a lot of regulars in mine too. I think they like the heat, so it's probably a good sign.
Okay, a little bit about some not so hot composting. There's some other examples over there on that. In my sheet composting, I didn't look that time. But, especially people with apartments or small spaces, use a direct barrier, which usually put it through a blender with some water, and now you've got your vegetables or soup, and you just make a trench and pour it in there, cover it back up with soil, and mark it, and then go a different place. But you don't put it right on existing plants. You put it in where you're going to plant, where I want to, it'll work in. Which I didn't actually mention when you're putting this pile together. I did have it up there. You get green stuff, brown stuff, air and water come with it. But you need the soil microorganisms if you have a fresh start, especially if you're using a tumbler. You have to take a shovel full of dirt from a garden or a place where there's active live soil and get it in there. And put it on in the middle, basically. And your tumbler, you need even more. If it's on the ground, it will eventually soil will work up into it. You need to get it started. In fact, if you don't, you can buy, if you go to the store and buy compost starter, which is like yeast, dried yeast. It's dried microorganisms that have been dehydrated, and you moisturize them and they come alive. And boom. And if you've got growing trees and anything, shovel full of too of soil will have microorganisms in it. And then once you get it cooking, and then you just, because you don't harvest the entire pile at once, and take out half to a third of it or something, or a quarter. And then, so they're still in there working. Plus you take them out. So same thing with compost tea. Take that finished compost, put it in a bag, put it in the water, like tea. And aerated compost tea bubbles air through that. And it's quite the process. It takes quite a bit of study and equipment. It's not a fish tank aerator. It's really high velocity air. And it just stirs things up. And then you put some molasses or something in there for added sugar, so microorganisms multiply like crazy, and you have to use it immediately.
Right.
You use it right now.
Yes.
And then what's left in the tea bag is mulch, still good mulch. Just don't have much life in it. Another method is to use worms. Worm composting you can do in the house, in the garage. Be careful about the temperature and sunshine. I lost a lot of worms once when we moved. I moved to a new place. I put them in the shade of the tree, and then I got busy, and I forgot that the sun moves. The shade moved away. But the red wiggler is the variety of worm that does not need soil. That's why they can live in a pile of newspapers or cardboard. They love to live in cardboard. And so they don't eat as much as a big pile of compost, but they do. It does work. You can really get kitchen scraps. They use all the green stuff. And wakashi, if you haven't, is a fermentation process that uses EM1, which is effective microorganisms #1. Made here in Tucson. It's a Japanese invention, but it's manufactured out of West Grant Road and sold out of Texas. Although there used to be a couple places around Tucson that sold it.
So by Eco Grow on St.
They probably do have
Second
that.
eco growth.
Barbara's place is not open anymore, so yeah, I'm sure Eco Grow had it. And that's another thing that takes a That's a 2-hour lecture and a lot of studying, but it's a fermentation process that you can do. It takes bones, animal meat, anything like that. It does everything. And then once done with that, then you can put it in compost and get it into your soil. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's about done. Any more questions that popped up?
No.
How much water do you need? How much do you need to water the compost in the desert?
Well, we used to say like a wrung out sponge. We got these others should be like a wrung out sponge. It shouldn't be soggy. It should be crunchy. It's going to dry on the sides. We're assuming you have some kind of container around those squares. It's going to dry out on the sides. That's why you turn things. The outside's glued in, and you do that. You sprinkle it a little bit. If it gets too wet, you can just spread it out and it'll dry. Or
if it gets too wet, it'll stink, and that's anaerobic.
yeah,
Anaerobic.
if it gets too wet, it usually drives out the oxygen, and then it's a different size, different bacteria. We're trying to multiply our friendly bacteria. The other ones, they stink. It's a different type of decay because they run out of oxygen. Usually the trouble is mostly running out of water. Like I said, that's when the temperature starts down, especially in a tumble or something like that. It starts down and it's out of something. It's usually water. So it won't necessarily jump way back up again, but it'll stir it up and it'll start from there and go.
What I noticed is that she has her pile, she has like a pile of maybe around here. And she has it on a drip where so if water comes on her drip irrigation. And she said that works really well for her. I have a tumbler, so I have to water it like a lot more than that personally, but for her, that works really well.
Yeah, well, that brings up like location. Where do you put it? Like I said, the sun doesn't make it hot. It doesn't care. But you don't want it when you're back step because it will attract bugs. There's going to be bugs in your compost. You just can't get away from them. But they're helpful. They're eating the big pieces into little pieces, and then the bacteria can take over. Just watch out you don't get a whole colony full of roaches. That's it. Then you have to spread it, get rid of it. But you're going to have one or two where grubs and so on show up, and all kinds of little Drosophila fruit flies. They're all over. And Drosophila fruit fly is a very good hummingbird food. I used to have when I go out my door when I have a compost. The hummingbird would come over and start circling over there, like, hurry up and get the lid off. Take that lid off and back off, and it just eats like crazy and it goes away.
Oh, nice.
Up out of there and take the lid off.
Yeah, in the summer when we go out and water the compost because it would dry a little bit, I have it open. Why you could see the bugs fly and hummingbirds come.
Yeah.
They loved it.
I have a rotating composter and then one that sits on the ground, and Joy has taught me this, how to seal up all the vents. So air still gets in there, but it doesn't dry out and everything's nice.
Thank you. That's probably what I need to do. I think I have too many holes in mine.
Yeah, that's all the commercial ones have too many holes. Even some of the ones that we made here out of the old dumpsters, they put a little too many holes in them. But especially the commercial ones, I recommend duct tape. And just especially on the, just leave it roll down there at the bottom. There's one commercial one, I didn't have a picture of it up there, but it's a pretty good size. And it has that's another way to do it. But it has a pipe that comes in from the bottom and brings air up through the middle. And that's another thing you can do in a composter, especially an open bin, perforated pipe. Green pipes with 4 holes and drill your own, stick it down the middle, and build it that way. You just put some water down the middle. So you can do that with growing plants too, in a pot. You can do the same thing. But you don't want to water heavy with the hose. I was talking about where you're going to put it. You don't want it right next to the house. You don't want it out in South 40 where you have to lug water out to it. Because you do need a sprinkling can, or you just want to sprinkle it. You don't want to drown it with a hose. You're not putting out fire. Just getting it moist.
It sounds like a wire would be too open. If
It is, and it contains it, but the bigger you make it, the more insulation you've got.
yeah, it can work.
If you've got the volume control.
Yeah.
Most of these numbers are pretty good for what we have in the home.
Yeah.
That's the most inexpensive way to create a container.
Yeah.
Is with the wire. For people that are on a budget.
Is it a problem with critters getting in? Like, I found a little mouse, like scampering out.
Because there's food in there.
Uh-huh.
And it may be garbage to you, but it's food to lots of people. That's why you want to enclose it. Where it doesn't have to be sealed tight, but it will attract
Oh, this is
everything. But the little
like-
mice will go for it. And just like roaches, you don't want them to make a nest in it. They'll visit and leave.
no, okay,
But don't let them take up housekeeping.
Yeah.
It means it's, you haven't disturbed it enough.
no.
We'll turn it over often enough. If you let it sit there for a month, you're gonna have critters. If you turn it at least once a week, you usually discourage activity.
The ants have taken up living in my compost pile.
Yeah, my answer, especially even the tumblers, I figure out how to get in there. And there's not much you can do about it.
On the bottom of my composter that sits on the ground, I put a piece of hardwood cloth and then put the compost on top of it to keep critters from
Get
getting
from
in.
digging in.
Do that as the same with the garden. They don't want into a closed garden, so you need the fence to down below ground and then out. So figure out how to do that.
Is it okay to put mistletoe in the skis?
Do what?
Is it okay to put mistletoe in the skis?
Mistletoe, yeah, as far as I know. In fact, big no-nos, as far as I'm concerned, if they're new to weed.
No.
Yeah. Now, if you're mowing the grass, if you've got it and you're mowing it, and you're sure there's no seed heads out there, that's fine. That's just green grass stuff. But pull out the runner, get it in the garbage because it's good. You can't kill it. It's too hard. Even if you get real hot, you're not going to kill it. Same goes with tomato seeds, which are not a pest, but you're going to have some tomato sprouts in your compost because the seeds don't die easily. They're really tiny. They get over the corner.
They're easy to pull.
They're very easy to pull, and once you pull them, then they're green compost material. You just pull it out, lay it down, and it's dead. So, we usually say, and the sign says too, no cannabis and eucalyptus. I don't know if we've ever proved eucalyptus is not good in compost if it's totally composted, but if it survives, then you've got a problem, possible. We used to say no eucalyptus too, because that's medicine. It make medicine from the eucalyptus leaf, but once it falls on the ground and it's dead and dry, nobody's ever experimented with that to prove it one way or the other.
What about oleander?
You know, that's what the oleander said. I don't know if anybody's ever done any serious testing on it. We recommend you don't use it just because it's toxic when it's green.
If you only have a little bit, like for my vegetables in the kitchen, then I don't have enough of anything really to make a pile all at once. Can you use straw and manure?
You can use straw.
Just layer it, make a big pile of straw manure?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't need a lot of kitchen scraps. You can use other things like manure.
Yeah.
Fresh manure. And chicken manure is good too. Yeah.
What about alfalfa hay?
Alfalfa hay? Yeah. It gets bad.
Don't think you want to get the GMO alfalfa though.
Oh, yeah.
They're growing GMO alfalfa now, so find out if there's GMOs in them.
You know where you can get that? Non-GMO?
you don't want it.
I'm not sure. You know where you
I don't
can.
know, you have to find out if it's GMO or not. Does the GMO stuff go away when you break it down? I'm not sure about that.
GMO, it's not a lingering chemical. It's,
No.
they mess with the gene. It's not anything that stays around. It's just the process of reproduction.
Yeah.
So it's not harmful. It's just they don't like how it's reproduced.
It's harmful to us if you eat it.
It's not harmful to, I mean,
Yeah,
that's a whole other thing, but it's about the reproduction process, of making seeds and stuff. It's not actually a chemical that stays in her or anything like that. It's about the chromosomes.
Right.
But it's,
So once it's composted,
yeah,
it's-
once it's composted, it's broken there.
yeah. Question about whether you can use newspaper with color ink.
I think so. Most, I would say, the black ink, the print is usually soy based, no longer petroleum based. I don't know about the color, but I wouldn't use slick magazines, slick page magazines, because you don't know what they've got in them. But the Sunday comics is the only thing I can think of with color, and it probably is okay. It's not going to have that much of it.
When you have cardboard, can you layer cardboard in there and let it decompose?
You can.
You need to cut it out.
You need to have it torn up a little bit. It's good for worm bins. It's also good for cheap composting. If I didn't mention, they have it on the sign over there. Cheap composting is where you take your ingredients and you spread it out on the ground like one now. We have it from Bermuda grass where we moved. So we just covered it all with compost, mostly green stuff, and then covered that with cardboard, sheets of big cardboard, with blocks on it so it would blow away. And then after 6 months, it's all nice dirt, soil.
And the Bermudas? Bermudas are gone.
Well, then you got to trim around the edges sometimes, but it'll go away. It'll need that. That's.
I've got Bermuda growing under my concrete slab, and it keeps growing up from under the slab.
Yeah.
You
Can't get rid of it. That's the only place where I recommend Roundup. But I don't recommend spraying it. You don't spray it.
I tried vinegar, but that doesn't do it either.
You don't spray Roundup. You mix up this concentrated solution. You pick a little artist paintbrush, dab it in there. You paint underside of the leaf, the plant you want to die. It's grass, you just paint a few leaves of grass, and it takes 14 days.
But it only goes with Bermuda, it only goes to the next nubbin where it roots. And then it will go to the next nubbin where it roots. But once it's under the slab, you can't get rid of it. I got it growing up inside the walls of my house.
Yes, it'll do that. Okay.
So I have Vitamix compost, like countertop composter, and really what it does is dehydrates and grinds kitchen scraps. So if I'm putting that into the regular compost pile, it's is it a brown? Is it a green once it's been cooked like that? Yeah.
Okay, because you use it when it gets hot.
Yeah, heats it and then
soup.
grinds it.
You just make soup, right?
Except it's dry. It's dehydrated, and so it's like a powder.
Oh, yeah, actually dry it down.
Yeah.
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 I was thinking we'd still have all the green energy once the protein.
Okay.
Okay.
It's nice and small.
It's nice and small. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it work?
How well or how physically?
How well does it work?
Really well.
I would think it would decompose quickly.
Yeah.
If it has enough dry stuff, carbon to go with it.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, everything has more carbon than they do nitrogen. It's, even the lettuce leaves, there's more carbon in there than there is nitrogen. But, we call them high nitrogen green stuff. So, yeah, it might lose a little bit of something in the heating process and drying process, but I'm sure that it's mostly there.
I just wanted to give a, you mentioned about manure in the compost, and I just wanted to give a plug about Beryl,
Yes.
who with her sheep manure, and what an incredible addition that makes in your compost.
Sheep manure is very good because it's, especially when she feeds them good stuff.
Yeah.
Horses, if they're out in pasture, eat a lot of things, including weeds. And they don't always kill the weed seeds going through. Sheep is probably one of the better. It says over here on the sign we can use giraffe and rhinoceros. But I don't have any.
That's another desert. That's not this desert. Different desert.
Also, what about pigeon?
What?
What about pigeon?
Pigeons?
Pigeons.
Yeah, bird stuff is great. Guano is even better. Use it directly. Although it's hot, it tends to be hot if you use guano fat.
Yeah. Nitrogen.
Isn't that what they call pigeon dung too?
What?
Does that, they refer to it the same as bat dung? Bat
Guano.
So I take care of a property where they have been hanging out underneath this portion of the building. And, you know, there's a fair amount of poo there. So I can scoop that up and use it. Oh, yeah.
It's pretty hot, so don't put it directly around the plants.
Well, yeah, that's the concern was that I read, you know, that sometimes they get into like garbage and stuff like that. And
yeah, well, that process, you can buy it in the stores. That's how good it is. You can buy it.
Wear a mask. Yeah. That's fascinating. You don't want to feel there, but if you're wearing a mask, you're scooping and then you put it in more. It's just like, you know, compost is just don't.
How long would you suggest composting chicken poop for it to be ready for your plants?
Oh, when it cools off, when it gets hot. It'll cool
So
off.
it's
Yeah.
pretty fast.
When you can't identify it anymore, it's good enough.
Okay. Okay.
With the horse, I have a friend that has horses, and she has a barn full of horses that are, people come in and do that, and they use worming and antibiotics and stuff like that, but she doesn't do that with her horses. So I get the fresh horse manure from her because I don't want all those antibiotics and other stuff in compost pile. I don't know that they're broken down totally because the pile doesn't always heat up that much.
I've heard that you don't want to use horse manure as an initial because it doesn't.
It also doesn't, they don't digest the grain and stuff the way that multiple stomach animals do. So there's a lot of weeds and stuff. And horse yeah.
Well, I see how this sign over here says trash bag composting. What is that?
What?
Trash bag?
Trash bag composting? What is that?
I haven't, apparently they think if you get a big enough trash bag, but it's got, again, we said at least 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, really get the insulation. If you have a wire screen that big, it'll compost. And so the big 50-gallon trash bag, I suppose, would do it. It would, you'd have to make sure it got air. It's going to use up oxygen and real fast. It's going to stay wet longer, but it's going to use up the air real fast. So, and then try it.
So kind of like using it as a container, but maybe instead of just a bag, we could like wire to then line it with like plastic or something.
Yeah.
Shake it up often.
I know some people try to compost on a 5-gallon bucket. You just can't get the volume you need. Get the insulation, even if it's a thick bucket.
You could do a worm, but.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got a question about whether anyone has harvested bat guano from under the bridges at Campbell and along the river to put in their compost.
Well, there are companies that go out in the caves and mine and stuff. I mean, it's a business. They sell it. They don't refine it. They just scoop it up and put it in a bag, and you pay for it.
Exactly.
But yeah,
If anybody's done it, Joy's done it.
Right? Joy's the one who asked the question.
Oh. Then nobody's done it. That's the
If you were to grow like over the winter a cover crop, a grain manure cover crop, it would be best to just turn it in and compost it.
you're doing the same thing. Yeah, you're doing the same thing. You turn over a cover crop, turn it in, plow it over. But one of the things you're doing there is you're disturbing the soil when you do that. You turn up the roots and everything, and then it has to take time to get back to normal. And so if you just take it off on the top, leave the roots in the ground, the microorganisms will take care of the roots, they'll destroy them and compost them, and the green stuff will compost on top much faster.
Or it'll dry out and you can dry it up.
We've gotten away from that tilling and the modern organic gardener especially tills the soil once on a brand new property, and that's it. You never break the surface again with killing it and turning it
Not even the
over.
first couple of inches, like to mix in.
You just keep mulching on top of it.
No, I see.
You have to dig the plant, but you don't have to. You know, what they did back in the Midwest for a century, at least. And now we're paying for that. Because now we don't have what is it? They're talking about the biodiversity in the soil.
Right.
Mycorrhizae is missing. There's some element that's totally missing now. And essential nutrients. And some of the minerals. They just depleted all that by just digging it up and expose it to the air.
I think Barbara was talking, we were talking once about how there's fungus and bacteria around the roots, and if you cut off the top and leave the roots, then all that stays in the soil, right. And that's really desirable.
If you kill it, you kill most of it.
Yeah.
But the chemical farmers didn't care about that because they're going to pour oil, use motor oil or potential motor oil. Right. Most all of it's made from petroleum.
Right.
And the plants actually use that as it goes by. It's got ammonium nitrate or something. As it goes by the roots, they can use it. And then if it's going down, then they can't use it. So you got to put more.
Right.
And also kill all the soil bacteria. So that's the only food you can now feed them. And eventually it gets down to the water supply. And so that's why we preach otherwise. Right. Keep the soil alive and doing what it's intended to do.
I think we're pretty good this time.
It's gentle.
Another thing that I do that I see on one of your signs over there too is I have cats and dogs, so when I brush them or if I collect their fur, I put that in my compost.
Yeah.
Just their hair.
For dog hair, yeah. That's one part of the dog you can put in there. Then from your dryer, if you're really serious about it, you can take that out of your dryer. Put it in there, especially if it's cotton. Now, if it's nylon or polyester, that's a different thing. But most of the lint is cotton.
Yeah, and you can go to hairdressers. Sure. You know, you can get like big piles of hair from a hairdresser and throw that into. Or coffee grounds from
And that's almost brown stuff,
right?
Coffee grounds, but it's damp and it's small. That's
It's already broken down.
And it's acidic and it helps balance the alkalinity.
Yeah.
So coffee is considered, is it brown or is it considered, which, is it brown or green?
The coffee grounds?
Yeah.
I would say they're more brown. The nutrients that are taken out of them, most of the roasted.
Mhm.
So there's not much nutrition in coffee. Believe it or not.
Just that This is very sad. Jim, can you talk about eggshells in the compost?
Oh, eggshells, sure. That's another good question we get sometimes. All right, out here, our soil is quite alkaline, so is our water. Eggshells are made out of calcium, so is caliche. I mean, it's a mineral you don't need in your soil. There's enough of it. The best thing to do with eggshell is to dry it. Turn it upside down, you put it out on the fence post, or you can put it in your oven. You put it in the oven, it's just a light on it, it's an electric oven. And dry that membrane, which is an animal product. If you put it out on the fence, you'll attract all kinds of critters to eat. And then you just crush it and give it to the chickens. So that's the best way to recycle an eggshell. Is to give it to somebody who's raising chickens. They put it in with the feed, they pick it up without knowing it's a shell, and little pieces of it, ingest it and make more shells.
And they love it.
Yeah.
It's like candy.
It's like candy.
Chicken candy. Are you interested in recycled eggshells? Bring it on.
Have you ever heard that?
No.
It looks like the brick was for the chickens.
Okay.
But I heard what it does too is that if you have a lot of house plants, you can grind them up or like crunch them up, mix it with a little bit of just like a tablespoon of vinegar, and then and a little bit of water, and then it makes it that calcium. You scoop off like the top of the slime that forms, and then mix that in with water in a spray bottle, and you spray your house plants. And that, like, because then usually that's high soil that doesn't have a lot of calcium in it, you know, so that's like a calcium supplement for the house plants.
So,
you spray your soil, or you can spray off.
how did the hybrid meeting go on the Zoom people? Did we get that?
It gets muffled when there's crosstalk, so it's very hard for them to hear when there's crosstalk. I'm typing any questions from you all because they can't hear you very well, but they get the echo. And I think we'll be fine if we use a microphone next time. We're going to need to use a microphone for the speaker. Yeah, the room is way too echoey.
Yes.
It's hard to hear in the room. So people on Zoom, it ain't just you. So if we have a microphone, and even if it's just going straight into the computer, it doesn't have to go into the room, then it'll, yeah. And Joy says, works well when questions are repeated or typed, thanks. And she's loving it from home.
Yay. Great information.
Yeah, I'm sure that sounds, applause sounds terrible on Zoom.
Wow. So do we have stuff to give away? Or?
We do.
Right.
I don't know how we will.
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't given it to
Anybody?
someone. Yes. I think all these people came in, but you didn't get one.
I don't need one.
Okay.
But I'll take it.
There may be something.
Well, we're gonna try something cool about that relates to your landfill thing.
Here, so
Council and CK is starting an initiative, or has started it, to collect all sorts of plastic that is unrecyclable, like little crinkly wrappers, the bubble wrap, packing things, any kind of like that plastic that that I know I have, it would be like, should I put this in the recycle? No, it's not recyclable. Any of that's in plastic, but like saran wrap, plastic bags, all of that stuff, they're collecting it. There's a huge orange bin at the Council 6 office. Is it Ward 6?
Ward 6.
Ward 6, right down here off of First and like 1 block south of the Speedway. And there's a big orange bin that they are collecting all of that. You can just put all that plastic. You can even make it, put it in a plastic garbage bag and just put the whole bag in there. You don't have to separate it or clean it or anything.
Yeah.
And they're working with a company in town to make them into giant like Lego blocks to use it as a building material. And they put some benches in Green or not Green Park in Himmel Park.
That's cool.
And you can see, and then there's an example block in the Ward 6 office also. But it's just a drive-through, you can just drop it off. And so it's really great. It's changed my life because that is a huge part of my unfortunately of my trash, you know. So
where is that?
it's in the Ward
right
6
here
parking lot. Yes, it's just down on First and like 1 block south of Speedway. So it's right there, Walgreens, it's like about the same block.
It's behind Whole Foods essentially, more or less.
Well, that's the only location right now. I know he's working to try to make it as part of the.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He's trying to make it as part of.
I have all kinds of them. I don't know what to do.
But right now, anyone can drop it off there. It's 24 hours, it's just in the parking lot.
Yeah.
It's a big orange bin. If you go down there too, and next meeting I can bring them, they have a bunch of flyers that even have like a little plastic bag included that say exactly all the things, but, or if you go on the website of Ward 6, you can see it on there, but so yeah, it's pretty great.
Sustainable Tucson is doing a lot of things with the alternative stuff to try and get stuff out of the landfill.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about.
Yeah, that's
the different kinds of
like
things.
glass. We can take your glass to Ward 6 too, and I think some of the
Yeah,
others.
true.
Yeah, there's other locations
More
too.
glass.
I think
Yeah, there's one by the loop right there too.
Yeah.
Your plastic bag and then not styrofoam in it, or they have.
Yeah, no styrofoam, yeah.
So you have to be kind of.
You have a question?
I have a question.
I still think
So, compost and,